Hello everyone, it's your favorite night owl here with a quick topic video on home versus property defense, as there are some distinctions to be made. Before we get started, feel free to subscribe. This video is completely unsponsored. This video is not sponsored by any brand names that may or may not be mentioned or viewed within this video. Fantastic. Let's get on with it, shall we? As to today's topic video on home versus property defense, as there are distinctions, of course, to be made as previously mentioned. Home referring to the confines of the home, and property or general property, that could be your car, it could be your land, it could be all of the above in one spot, so variations in consideration must be made. Now, home defense, as it comes in the confines of the home, has its distinctions in there is limited space that needs to be protected. Your home could be basically a micro apartment, or in size, very small, like a camper, or it could also be quite large, with, hallways going down around 20 feet. With various rooms and stuff are 20, 40 feet, all depends your size. From the smallest to the largest mansions, they all have similar considerations. As such, is the primary concern is those short distances, and walls are a factor. There are unique circumstances to take into account, like over-penetration. If you choose the route of firearms. If not, what measures you're going to be taking. Storm or bullet-resistant glass for the windows. Nice, good, sturdy locks for the door. Nice, good, sturdy door. That may be where many people want to leave it. Also, there's matters of legality as well. That should have been mentioned pretty earlier on, as in many places it is very restricted in what you can and cannot do. And if you take the route of, firearms, it does vary quite widely around the country and internationally as well on what you can and cannot have, or how quickly it can be obtained should you decide it's become an issue. Now, in the case of property defense, those problems are extended or contracted, depending upon the property in question. You have your vehicle, which you can be out and about on, very confined space, and the property protection could extend to either simply preventing someone from making off with your vehicle, which is very difficult to prevent unless you're right there, and even then you have to take into consideration how to plan on doing it and the laws around it. There are some places that if someone trying to cause you harm in any way gets harmed, well, you're going to run into an issue where you might be the one going to prison. That's just a sad fact of modern life, where there are large parts of the country where someone tries to cause you severe harm, the R word, or, actually tries to kill you, and cause permanent unalive you. This could result, if they get harmed in the process and you protect yourself, even if you just pushed them and they fell, there is a real chance you will go to prison. So that's always something to keep note of, and what's more valuable to you. Your life or the life of the person trying to cause you harm, of which, by stealing your property, they're also stealing all those nice little old hours you worked to make the money to get that property. And that is an unfortunate aspect of the whole situation. They're not only stealing that piece of property, they're stealing those dozens, if not hundreds of hours of labor you spent trying to make the money to acquire those things. Generally speaking, the vast majority, from personal observation, people who say you shouldn't be worried about it are people who feel they're not at risk themselves or have made it in the world, so thus by they can afford the good security. And that's always a consideration. Now, that's the contraction of space when it comes to, say, a vehicle. Well, in the case of property, that could be anywhere from a patch of grass out front, like if you live into a city, to multi-acre farmland, or just an acre. And then you could be talking about distances of 100, 200 yards. And there are some considerations. You could have an encounter, especially if you have a large property, or a larger property, or depending on where your property is, even if it's a post-stamp property, you might bump into a poacher while you're out. You might bump into someone who just sees you and decides that, yeah, you may be 100 yards away, but they would rather remove you from the picture with whatever means they have at their disposal. And being that they're criminals, they largely won't care about gun laws. So, in many countries with particularly strict gun laws, criminals seem to have little to no problem getting them. And that's because, well, at the end of the day, they have little respect for the authority. Beyond, how effective that authority is at hunting them and putting them behind bars. Now, personally, I do not fault the person defending their property, nor do I fault the person in a desperate enough situation to try to act upon that desperation in a way that would involve acquiring a source of income from acquiring somebody else's property. I'm trying to be polite there. But there does come a point where the only way to get what you want is through somebody else, and that's just an unfortunate fact of life. And I don't fault either party involved. Now, and I feel both have an inherent right to protect their lives and what is theirs. Because I understand what is theirs represents hours of labor being sacrificed in order to get it. And that's time you can't get back. But most people have little concern in that regard, and they would much rather you be living off of, out of a food bank the rest of your life, constantly worried if the house is going to be taken from you, than have to stomach the thought of you actually having the right to protect yourself from someone seeking to take those things from you. It's the gated community mentality, essentially. They feel safe, or they feel more endangered from their fellow citizen that is law-abiding than they feel threatened by the criminal themselves. So, those are the two main reasoning for that logic. Now, property defense overall means there is a chance that if you choose not to take more aggressive stance, you may seek to run away. And at the end of the day, if you seek to run, well, there's only so far you can run, and if they're faster than you, well, you're up a creek without a paddle. You can always take the big rock approach, but, in some places, remember, check your local laws, because if someone causing or trying to cause you harm gets harmed, you may be the one in trouble. So, with property defense, you have a much wider variety of measures to be taken. You can learn through various thorny plants and other things to make your own hedgerows or an all-natural barrier that would be difficult to cross. Basically, all-natural barbed wire, and barbed wire is an option as well, but you have to be able to afford those expenses. There are things other than firearms, but if they're already heavily restricting firearms for self-defense, then you're likely in a community that if someone trying to cause you harm gets harmed, they see you as the problem. And because there's just, many who would value the transgressor more than the person being transgressed. That's just a common fact of life at the moment. In fact, I think it's probably existed forever. Because you can look back into aristocratic societies, them arguing why the peasants shouldn't be allowed to have, be armed. It's much the same thing. It's, they can't handle the responsibility because, of course they're lesser than the elites in mental capacity, generally speaking. The old trust the experts kind of mentality, of which when most people say that, they're saying it because, well, they're not only saying trust the experts, they're specifically saying trust the experts they trust, not experts in general, because if the expert says something they don't want to hear, they'll generally try to find some way to discredit that expert. So it doesn't really matter anyway, whenever they say it. Now, there are multiple options, from handguns, all natural methods, and just taking natural precautions, like making sure your door's locked, and that is basically going to be some of the biggest factors right there, is preventative measures. By making yourself a harder target, then you are by default a harder target. And most people intend on committing crimes, at least from my personal observations and what I've seen and projected by various news outlets, and has been generally a lot of crime tends to be opportunistic. So, there is those considerations to take into account. If it's property, is it just your vehicle? Is it your land? If you have land, you have the car. Is it your house, and how big your house is? Get familiarized with your house. There's measures you can take without potentially causing harm. And you have to take into account, do you live in an area where if any harm befalls the person transgressing against you in such a harmful manner that, generally speaking, the law will see you as the problem along with your neighbors. Places like New York. So, although, that's just more of a general mentality a lot of people have, especially in larger cities. There's more emphasis on the value of the person causing the harm than the value of the person being harmed. So those are considerations to take into account overall. Now, there's always opportunistic criminals. There's issues with, like a hurricane rolls on through and looters come out, and those are all things to take into account. Look at the crime rate in your area. Try to gauge what the laws are and what you can and cannot do. And that's really all that needs to be said. Well, this is just a quick old rambling, and share, if you liked it, share, subscribe for more. There are more topic videos on the way. Alrighty then. I guess I'll be seeing everyone around. Toodles!